school peer mentors in our GirlPower program. For those of you that had a chance to watch the films over the weekend, I think you noticed that they were all very powerful in their own way. I'm anxious to hear the discussion. We're proud to be involved in LunaFest. I'm Terry Hernandez, Executive Director for Chrysalis Foundation. So I'm going to sit back and listen, but let me just take a moment to thank the YMCA of Greater Des Moines and Girls on the Run, who helped us partner to present LunaFest 2021. With us, they share the vision for strong girls becoming smart women and powerful women, and I'm sure that you'll be encouraged when you meet the team of GirlPower peer mentors tonight. The theme of LunaFest is Someday is Now, and we believe that that's kind of a rallying cry for all women, a cry for equity and equality, which has long been our pursuit at Chrysalis Foundation and long been the pursuit of women. You'll hear inspiring remarks, comments about the films, but I know you'll enjoy meeting this impressive group of young women. So I will turn things over to Brooke Findley, who is the Chrysalis Director of Community Initiatives and Investments, who will MC our panel presentation tonight. Brooke?
Thank you, Terry. Just a moment here. All right, how's that? There we go, that's better. Thank you so much, Terry, and thank you to everyone who has chosen to join us tonight. We're very, very excited to have all of you with us. I am really excited to introduce a group of young women who I have had the opportunity to work with starting about a year ago at this time, some for longer. And this is a collection of our GirlPower High School mentors. So you see 5 young women on the screen. We have 12 in our program this year. And if you attend GirlPower Hour, which are happening over the next several months, you'll meet some of the other team as well. So Chrysalis began a collaboration with Mercy One Medical Center, Des Moines in 2012. And we came together as a community to look at factors that were showing an uptick in the number of younger and younger women who were coming to emergency at the hospital with injuries that appeared to be related to some kind of partner violence. And what we discovered was that there's a lot of cultural messages, a lot of media messages, and a lot of opportunities that had been missed when it came to working with younger girls and talking about healthy self-awareness and self-management skills, ultimately leading to better decisions about who you spend your time with and how you behave. So in an attempt to try to change that tide, we have been working pretty diligently with groups of high school and college peer mentors to deliver a curriculum that focuses on prevention with younger and younger girls in our Chrysalis after school program. We train these high school mentors to work with us and teach those concepts of healthy relationships in person or over Zoom this year, and help grow those skills so that they can make better choices working with their families, people in their community, and ultimately a romantic partner. We also have an amazing opportunity to work on employment and leadership development, which is what this is all about tonight, is really focusing on the opportunities for leadership. And ultimately, we want to continue what LunaFest started and amplify our voices, the voices of young women who we think have a lot to say. So I'm really happy to invite each one of you to introduce yourselves, just your first name and how old you are and how long you've been working with Chrysalis. Can we start with Cora?
Sure. My name is Cora, and I've been working with Chrysalis for 4 years. now. So
Thank you, Cora. How about Ellen?
Hi, my name is Ellen, and I'm a junior in high school. And this is actually my first year with Chrysalis, but I've loved every minute of it, and I'm excited to spend more years with the program.
Fantastic. Eliza?
I'm Eliza, and I'm a sophomore in high school, and this is also my first year with Chrysalis.
Excellent. Mia?
Hi, I'm Mia. I am 17 and a junior in high school. This is my first year with Chrysalis, and I'm very excited to continue being part of it.
Great. And Natalie?
I'm Natalie. I use she, her pronouns. I'm 19 and a freshman at Iowa State. I've been with Chrysalis for 3 years, and I'm a senior or college peer mentor.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that was really fun is knowing that we were going to all be watching these videos. And I kind of liken it to when you go to the theater and you have watched a movie, but unlike at home, you don't push pause and talk about things. And so that drive home is when you're thinking things through, processing. And so that's really what we imagine tonight to be like, is an opportunity to process and respond to these 7 really unique and thought-provoking films. So the first thing I would like to ask is, did you have a favorite? So if you did have a favorite, give me a thumbs up. Okay, yes, I love this decisive group. Definitely had a favorite. Cora, what was your favorite?
my favorite was video 2, which let me see, what was that called? That was called Knocking Down the Fences, and that was about the softball player who basically won an award that usually was given to men. So it's like a big opportunity, big award that she got it, but it wasn't really covered, which was kind of surprising. And it was nice to hear her side of the story and just different stuff about sports.
Excellent. Well, that was actually my favorite too. So I'm glad to hear that it was yours. Ellen, how about you?
Yeah, of course. I think I found my favorite to be the scientist versus Dartmouth. I think it's really interesting. I know a lot of people that go to Dartmouth, and I actually toured that college too. And so I of course liked that aspect of it, but also just like the whole medical profession and just the prestige that came with Dartmouth, like contrasted with all of the hardships that they were talking about and some of those things that we don't usually attribute to some of those prestigious areas. Like, we need to realize continue in those areas as well.
It almost reminded me it was too big to fail. How could this happen there? Absolutely. How about you, Eliza?
So I really liked the third one, Aligned Birds Cannot See. I thought the animation was really cool, and it's just an interesting topic. Like, you don't hear much about that story from that point of view, so I really liked that.
Excellent. Thank you. Mia, how about you?
So I like the same one Ellen did. I also like the scientist versus Dartmouth, but for the same reason she was saying, but also because along with the Me Too movement and a lot of things going on in present day, we've started to see this like toxic culture become a lot more normalized. And for most of us who are either in college or getting ready to go to college, it's been a pretty big aspect of our lives to be aware of and to be conscious of, so we can prepare for it and do something to protect ourselves from it. And the fact that we have to do that in the first place was a reason why I connected with the film, because I don't think it should even be something we have to prepare for, but the fact that it is and that it happens to everyday women, and so many of them, really stuck out to me. And the fact that the main girl who was part of it was also Indian really stood out to me. The fact that she felt brave enough and comfortable enough to be able to speak out about it, especially when she talked towards the end about representation and having other Indian women come out and talk to her about their own experiences was really eye-opening for me, because I know that it has existed in other communities, but because of different social norms, things are not always said the same way. And so it was really interesting to see all sides of that aspect.
Absolutely. Thank you. Natalie, did you have a favorite?
I did have a favorite. My favorite film was Betty Saar, Taking Care of Business. I appreciated it from an interview perspective, just because she's such an interesting figure. I thought it was inspiring how she handled, she's had a lifetime career in art and she's evolved a lot, but she's also faced a lot of backlash to her art. She was talking about kind of making art that plays on folk art or on artifacts, which aren't usually held very highly. She was talking about the first time she saw them in a museum, they were all in the basement, the folk art and the native art. And even going and evolving into using Black derogatory images in her art almost to heal. She just held herself with such a sense of humor, but also came into her power by kind of using these ironic images. And it was, again, it's just her as a force that made the film interesting to me, but seeing examples of her art and how it shaped her life, not only just making the art, but the reactions people had to her art, how it shaped her life and what she was making going forward, was interesting to me. So, yeah.
Great. Well, we'll be coming back to each of these, especially knowing where your hearts ended up will be a great aspect of this conversation. So I also should have mentioned earlier that we do have a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. If you would like to share a question, answer, or any comments, I'll be sure and include them in our conversation. So Cora, what did you think about that first film? So it was the Women's Euro-Arabian North Pole Expedition. And it followed the process of preparing for and conducting this expedition over many years. But, obviously they had to take this feature-length film and put it into a short. So we saw these snippets over many years, but a lot of defining moments.
I thought it was actually really inspirational because, like you kind of said, they did this over like multiple years, and I kind of like was labeling all the different challenges they had and like how they solved them, and like some of them were actually like really, really tricky because I think one of the very last ones, it was like the director who was doing it, she basically had to give up her chance of going to the North Pole and actually seeing that to help someone, which I thought was really good. But I felt so bad for her because she was giving up that opportunity, but she was able to help someone. So, and I thought it was really good that they overcame, just as a team together with people who were doing it and the film crew, how they overcame so many different obstacles.
Absolutely. I think that the obstacles were astounding. And I think that moment, Cora, that you're talking about, where one of the expedition members recognized that she was not going to be able to finish, and then also for the head of the film crew, also the emotion in that scene was pretty moving. Ellen, did you what were the words you would use to describe that film?
I really found that film to be just like eye-opening. I had no idea even about like expeditions like that. And I think it obviously leads into a discussion about like climate change and global warming, because they mentioned in that film like opportunities like that will be rare, if any, in the future for future generations of either just young females or just anyone in general. But I also found it really interesting how long it took them to prepare. I feel like with media, it's like so easy to make it look easy. With movies, even about like, I've always loved them about climbing Mount Everest or some of those really things that seem impossible, but then you watch a movie and you're like, oh, I bet I could do that. But no, it took them like years to prepare, and I didn't realize how long it took them to prepare. And then in the fact that that tiny little window, like they just had so many logistics they had to work out. And it like saddens me personally that more people won't be able to partake in that because of just global warming and that ice cap melting and everything like that, because that seems really, really awesome.
When there was a line that I wrote down verbatim from the film, they say that Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did, backwards and in high heels, while Ingeborg and Catherine did everything that the Polar Explorers did, backwards and on skis, with bulky gloves, working frozen cameras. That was a really interesting take because, and I think it was a perfect first film because it reminded us of the hard work of those behind the scenes as well as in front of the camera. Mia, what was something that you felt like that film captured or that you took away from it?
Yeah, so one thing I really admired about it was not only the fact that it was an all-women crew, both behind the scenes of the camera and also on the expedition, but this idea of women coming together for a common goal. So we see the director have to actually go back and never get to complete one of her like life goals of being able to go to the North Pole in an attempt to help this other girl who had gotten frostbite. And I find that really admirable because it is all about this idea of women coming together for a common goal that's more than just about yourself. She noticed that she had no real choice other than to help this girl out. Otherwise, she did have the potential of, at the bare minimum, losing her fingers. And so seeing all of those women work together, and then I think the biggest scene that stood out to me was that like reunion scene where they flew her in, I think, to the North Pole, and they all met together, and it hadn't seemed like the girl who had gotten frostbite had missed out on any of the adventure or had missed out on anything monumental because they were all there together in the end. And this unifying aspect was pretty fascinating to me.
I love that. That makes me think about the GirlPower team when you talk about the unified and how, you know, there's so much work and so many things that go into it. Natalie, I'm thinking about you when I think about this because last year, as you recall, we had a drastic change in our plan for GirlPower when COVID-19 shut down school. And out of all of our Chrysalis After School GirlPower high school mentors, you were the only person that didn't get a chance to teach a single class before schools shut down. But you've done all of the work, all of the planning, all of the training. How was that? And do you connect that to what you saw in this film?
So, yeah, while Mia was talking, I was thinking about the film kind of as a metaphor for progress in general, that, you know, the learning, the building, the journey is almost a bigger part of progress, whether that's moving on from an unhealthy relationship and trying to create healthy ones, or whether that's building career skills with the Chrysalis group that I ended up, you know, not getting to utilize in that exact moment, but that came in handy later. You know, the journey, without sounding corny, the journey is as much of a part of anything. Sheesh. Okay, I started that a little bit weird. But doing the work, it pays off in the end, even if it doesn't pay off in the way that you thought it would. So building those skills at that time, you know, I came back as a senior mentor. I wasn't expecting to carry on into college, and I was disappointed because I thought that was my last year of Chrysalis and I didn't get to utilize it. But even if I had not had the career opportunity here, I would have used those skills elsewhere. So whatever you learn on the journey can be applied in different ways. And so when Mia was talking about this sense of camaraderie, they were building this bond with each other, not just the skills to go to this one set destination. And I'm sure that the skills that they learned, even beyond the physical ones, are going to come in handy in their life, and they're going to use those throughout their life. So I think that that's the connection between their journey and my journey with Chrysalis.
I don't think you could have said it any better. Well, I suppose we better move on to Cora's and my favorite, knocking down fences. So Cora, you talked a little bit about some of the reasons that you really liked this film. So to recall, this was a film about AJ Andrews, who is the first woman to win a Rawlings Gold Glove. On the first 59 years, it was given to a man. AJ Andrews is a professional softball player as well as a graduate student at LSU. Cora, what parts of this particular film were most interesting to you?
I think kind of like some of the things that they said that was most interesting was like how she makes less than $15,000 a year, which I thought was really surprising compared to like how like men in sports get like so much money and then women in sports they get like barely anything. It's like the leftover dough basically. And how like another thing was just how men's sports get sponsored a lot more and they get funded a lot more than women's sports because of the fact that people think that, oh, there's not going to be that many people in women's sports, we won't sponsor them, that kind of thing. And I think that's very weird. And I really think women's sports should be sponsored equally as men or basically funded because they do the same things as men and they will put a lot of effort into this sport, just like everyone else who plays that. So
I think that part of the reason I geeked out over this video is because it was so full of information that I hadn't realized yet. One of the things I thought was very interesting is, can you believe in 2021 that a professional athlete would qualify for food assistance? Ellen, was that surprising to you?
It was surprising, but I think it was more surprising that I was like, wow, like I mean, I'm sure because of the way that the system has been set up. I think it has a lot to do with capability. I think the excuse that I've even heard like men in my own life make is that, oh, well, more people watch the men's sports than the women's sports. But I think it stems back to the beginning. As it started out with the men's sports or the male dominated industries, those obviously are more well known and so then that continues the cycle that women's sports will be less well known if that's even the case. But I think there was evidence in that video that said that there were definitely some sectors where there was equal amount of desire to watch and desire to play. So I, of course, did find that surprising, but I didn't in the fact that in the scheme of things, women in the workforce in general have yet to really be supported. We made such a big switch from feeling that women all needed to be homemakers, and then we just kind of threw them into the industry. And I'm actually doing some outside research on that right now about like policies that we can enact to best support women in the workforce, but even just like paid maternity leave. And I think there's so many aspects to being a woman and either having a professional athlete job or just any job in general. I think that there's a lot behind the scenes that people don't realize that makes it a lot harder.
Absolutely. One of the things that AJ also talks about is that she feels that her role or her responsibility is to knock down this one barrier as best she can, as the incredible athlete that she is. hoping that then other women won't have that barrier and that they can work on knocking down the next one. So I'm curious if there is a barrier that you think about being a part of knocking down.
I think for me personally, I've seen like, well, obviously the representation barrier, and I think that it's amazing that just even the first woman already knocked down the second barrier of being a woman of color. So I think she's already tackled that barrier. And like I said, with some of the barriers that I'm looking at more so in my additional research, I think even just like paid parental leave for all, like not even women, but just feeling that sense of like family, because I think there's a lot of different like units for family members that need support and stuff like that. So that's what I've seen. The biggest impact is that when a woman has to take maternity leave, then it's harder for her to get back into the workforce, or there's just so many things that a lot of people don't have to think about. And that continues, just a woman not being able to support herself financially, like individually, and then needs to rely on a partner. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done still.
Absolutely. So I hate to move on because I, of course, want to talk about all of these so much more, and we can always come back. But Eliza, moving on to A Line Birds Cannot See, which you had identified as a film that really caught your attention. As a reminder, this film tells a story in an animated form of one young woman's journey to safety, belonging, and a place to call home. What's interesting in this story to me was the patterns of abuse that the women that were highlighted were subjected to, really almost at every turn. Do you think, Eliza, that the story would have been different if the main character was a young boy rather than a young girl?
I think it would have been. I mean, it's hard to tell because everyone's different and everyone reacts differently to things, but I feel like in today's world, women are targeted for that kind of thing, for like the smuggling stuff over borders, because they just seem more innocent than a young boy would. So I feel like it would have changed, but maybe not in a different way, because maybe those men still would have taken in that young boy and made him do things that wouldn't also have been as great. So I think it's just different in like how they would have been used, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I also am curious, and this question can be for anyone who has a feeling about it. This is the one film that was entirely animated. And so we were hearing the person's voice, but we were not seeing them. And I am not a filmmaker, but I'm guessing this might have something to do with maintaining that person's privacy and safety. But did that add to the experience for you to imagine and not see that person? Or did you miss or kind of want to see them?
I think it kind of added to it. Like you said, I think it was for a safety thing, because you never know who could watch these, and it could have been one of those, like, I'm not saying it would happen, but there's always a chance that it could happen. And I feel like she could be targeted for like the US, and like if she doesn't have a citizenship here, I feel like she could also be targeted in that way.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking about one of the things that I felt very motivated by in the story is how incredibly tenacious she was. I can't do much, but I'm going to go stand and watch every day for my mom to come back. I she was left in these awful conditions in the desert, and she survived. She got away from her traffickers and had memorized her mom's phone number. I would hope that I would have that same tenacity after all of those things had happened to me. And I'm connecting that with the work that we do in GirlPower. One of the things that I think is really difficult is when we're working with young people, we cannot plan their future for them or protect them from what could possibly happen. But what we hope to do is give them the tools to make a choice that's right for them. Natalie, I saw you nod there. So I'd love to call on you. And does that resonate with you, how that connects to our work in GirlPower?
It does. We talk a lot in GirlPower about these skills or these lessons being a toolkit, right? So you have this toolbox and you have these skills. You don't necessarily have an instruction kit on how to solve this situation, but you have things that you can potentially use to solve it. And so, in this story, especially even memorizing her mother's phone number, she had a tool, and it was not useful to her when she was in the desert. She had to pick a different tool then, but she waited until the time was right, and she used that tool. And so she had a very limited amount of resources, but she did have this toolkit in her mind, right? And so she was able to pull these things back in later in her journey and use them and eventually save herself. And so I think that's a core way that ties back in, and that's why that resonates with me. Is I'd hate for it to happen. It's worst case scenario, but terrible things could happen to people that, graduate from these programs. There's that potential, but we're giving them, or we hope we're giving them, a toolkit or a helping hand somewhere along the line that could turn things around. So yeah, that does resonate with me.
Thank you. Well, moving on to film number 4, The Scientists versus Dartmouth. As a reminder, this film talked about how speaking out against sexual harassment could mean the end of a career, and how a group of young female scientists took on a whole department of that was being led by men who were not treating these women appropriately. The film went into a great deal about the importance of fitting in. In this case, the culture was partying and drinking, and it was normalized. Mia, have you ever been in a situation or felt like there was a culture around you where you just had to go with it, positive or negative?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that comes to mind is situations with like peer pressure. And I want to make a distinction here, because I think that when a lot of adults attempt to teach kids peer pressure, they tend to be like, hey, if somebody offers you drugs, you say no. And then like, that's the extent to it. Or it's something like hard line, something like that. There's no, like in the world today, peer pressure takes on different scenarios and different situations past just the one line, you do it or you're going to get in trouble. There's nothing like that anymore. There's a lot more like hidden meanings and things like social norms that you are supposed to understand, supposed to fit into, but don't necessarily want to or should. So for me, a lot of that happened in middle school. I don't know why necessarily it happened in middle school itself, but I felt kind of getting like lost from the Indian culture side of myself. I felt like I had to act more like my Caucasian friends in an attempt to like fit in. And the only way I could do so was by losing parts of me that made me unique, that made me and supported my Indian culture. And it was not until early high school that I realized the importance of connecting with that side of me, because it's such a big part of me. And not being able to see my extended family living in India and not being able to go over as often has made that even a bigger part of me, because I feel somewhat more connected when I'm in that side, in touch with that side of myself. So while I do feel like I've had that situation where I feel like I've had to assimilate or try to like go with the flow or try and fit in, I think it's especially important to not do that, because it can especially lead to things like we saw in this film with negative consequences. And I think that a lot of what we do in Girl Power connects to that as well, because we are teaching these girls a lot of deviances from social norms that have often constricted women to fitting into a box or fitting into a certain set of rules that we have been taught from a young age. I was lucky enough to have parents who taught me that these rules don't define me, but for girls who don't have that support in their own household, being able to come together as Girl Power and teach them things, even simple things such as like body image or the way the world may view you, or even your own self-worth and the opinion you have of yourself, has been a big part of my involvement with Chrysalis too, because I felt so lucky to be able to take the fortune I've had of having parents who taught me not to, like, I don't have to fit into those social rules, and being able to pass those on to other kids as well.
Absolutely. And I think it kind of comes, the age that you talked about has such a big impact, which is why I is one of the many reasons why I really do believe that Chrysalis is doing prevention work with the right age at the right time. Ellen, you also mentioned that this was a favorite film of yours, and I was really curious about, they talk about red flags in the film, and we've had discussions about this as a Girl Power team about how red flags are an important learning tool when it comes to looking back at something, but it can also be an opportunity for people to be hard on themselves. That was a red flag I didn't see. My fault. Which is that victim blaming, victim shaming that society is very familiar with. What do you think about where red flags fall in this conversation?
I think it's important to be mindful of red flags, but never to blame yourself for missing them. And I think that's a lot easier said than done, because obviously we live in a culture where, I mean, how many times do you hear women say sorry every day? Sorry for like walking in front of a man and they don't move, and oh, let me get out of your way. So I feel like we're trained to feel sorry for taking up space, to feel sorry for having emotions and all of these things that are just normal for humans. And so then this obviously then applies to even greater situations where nothing would be in those situations of victim blaming our faults at all, but we still look back and we're like, wow, I'm so sorry that I missed that. And I think red flags are kind of sometimes a funny joke. I know there's like games now that you can like be like, oh, my ex, like, whoops, red flag, with like your friends, and there's fun ways to look back on that. But I think it's more important to look at them like, wow, I don't think I would ever want to put myself in a situation again where the individual I was interacting with was this way, or had these beliefs or stuff like that, or even just passing it on to future generations. I've seen a few unhealthy relationships in my life, and I think of a lot of times the ways that those people have viewed the red flags that they per se missed was more to be like, hey, Ellen, make sure you really know this person and you really look into this person before you ever commit long term or move things forward. So I think it's more important to look at it like that. And I feel so sorry to be in a society where we still make it feel like the burden instead of the learning.
One of the things,
Can I say something real quick? So I also found this interesting because some of these females were psychology, like they had PhDs in psychology, so they've been trained to know the red flags. And I find it interesting that they can see the red flags in other people's relationships, but they can't necessarily see the red flags in their own relationship. So I found that really interesting.
Yes. And Eliza, it's like you were reading my mind. One of the things that I saw the group of women really seem to struggle with is that exact thing. That, you know, we all look back in hindsight and can be shaming to ourselves, but these women were still taking it hard years and years later, even though they technically, you know, they did not win. They went through horrible things that they shouldn't have had to, but they did get justice. And so Cora, I think this is a great question for you to comment on. You know, what would you tell our GirlPower students when it comes to, we're in group, we're learning, and they have those aha moments where they're like, oh gosh, I've been doing this to myself or doing this to other people, I feel bad. What do you tell them about when they just learned something that is going to really mess with who they think they are?
Well, I would try to comfort them the best that I can, try to give them like help that they need. Like if it's to like someone else that they're doing it, I would try giving them like tools so then they can stop doing it to the other people. And if it's someone doing it, if like one of their friends or something is doing it to them, then it's kind of where like I can also help them with like tools and tell them like, hey, this is like my opinion, but I don't think this is a good friendship and stuff like that. And kind of give like my opinion, but not enforce my opinion because it's just an opinion. It's not telling them, hey, you should go do this. So and giving them tools as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, going on to film number 5, Until She Is Free. For those of you that watched the films, you'll recall that with Audre Lorde, the author, as a guide, an artist worked to deconstruct power and beauty. Who was represented as powerful? How was that decided? And what can we learn from that? And so one of the things that the artist talks about is that American culture has made the idea of motherhood all about erasure and valor of sacrifice. I felt those words when she said them. And we talk about this in GirlPower about the double standards that exist between men and women in heteronormative relationships in terms of parenting. So in a heteronormative relationship, you have a male parent and a female parent who are doing the exact same thing but are seen so differently. Oh, look at dad out there babysitting, you know, and doing a great job. And mom, why can't you keep those kids under control? Do you, I know I identified with that as a mother. Do you see that in society or in your own lives? Natalie, have you seen that play out?
I mean, it almost feels like unnecessary to ask any girl if she's seen double standards play out in her life in general. I mean, the short answer is of course I have. You know, and it's societally imposed, but it's also, you know, women, because of that double standard, women feel that they need to be doing more. But you know, you get home from work and you feel like you need to like get the chores done as well before your partner gets home, or you feel, you know, when you were talking about or when the film was talking about, I guess, valor of sacrifice. So, you know, putting other people ahead of yourself, that's one of the biggest double standards, or one of the biggest differences between expectations for men and women is always putting someone ahead of yourself if you're a woman, you know, and that's everything from, you know, preparing meals or kind of what we consider like the obvious expectation of women or the traditional expectation of women, which is homemaking, or even in the workplace, are you going to take on extra responsibilities when asked? I know in my other workplace, which I will not call out by name, but I feel like my boss expects me to do extra kind of housework at my job. I work with 3 men and I get asked to do the schedule, even though if you looked at me on a personal basis, I'm terrible with dates and times and I'm not organized. There's someone that might be better to take that on, but because it's just a little extra labor, I feel that it has something to do with being a woman, or it has something to do with the perception of kind of my over being. I start sentences sometimes I don't know where they're going. But I think women also feel like an emotional responsibility in their workplace or in their home to be overly kind or overly generous and offer more than you're getting paid for. And that's fully because of that societal push. I don't think it's almost ever a personal thing where you feel like you really owe it to that workplace. You just feel that expectation. So
I was going to say also, your boss probably knows you won't say no. And that goes a long way too. The other assertion that the artist made that I thought was really powerful was her mission to create more openness and open conversations about women's bodies, noting that sometimes messages about our bodies meant to protect actually end up making us more vulnerable. Does anyone have any thoughts that they'd want to share on that idea?
I mean, this for me connects straight into what I've been seeing, not only in the Iowa legislature, but also nationwide, in terms of a lot of the women's rights and feminist movements, more modern, are all about giving women a choice. Even if you personally do not believe in something, it is the choice to give every woman their autonomy over their own body to make that choice. Seeing pictures of a legislative room filled with 60 to 70-year-old white men making decisions about women's body through healthcare bills and different bills supporting different parts of women's healthcare, women's bodies, and really regulating that has been contradictory, to say the least, because not only have they never experienced any of this, but it's really not their choice to make in terms of providing that autonomy over someone else. Because it's easy to say, well, because of like the 14th Amendment or something, we're all free. Like, it's very easy to say that. And then you see systemic issues that support really like putting down women or not giving them the full autonomy that they really deserve. And something that resonated with the film was like the part where the parents were writing like a diary to their child that was like, I want you to know that your body is your own. Like, it is no one else's. It is your choice to do with you what you want. And I will always believe you if something were to happen. And that part really stuck out to me, especially in terms of like the Me Too movement coming out. There was like a huge wave of people who were saying that women were coming out against sexual assault in an attempt to bring down their like bosses and just people they didn't like, whether or not that had happened. And hearing that was so heartbreaking because it's kind of like we were talking about earlier, really like victim shaming when this wasn't their fault in the first place. So that part where they were giving their child this diary of like, we will support you and we will believe you no matter what, was really inspiring.
I hope that we also create that same feeling inside our Girl Power groups. I think you do an excellent job of that. While we may not get into typically situations where someone has been victimized and are going to be reporting to you in those moments, we are creating a safe space where they can ask questions and know that they're not going to be judged and that we're going to believe what they say and the questions that they have. And I think that's really powerful. Film number 6, Connection. it focused on connection to natural resources, and those who care for it can have a great impact on your happiness. After it came after film 5, which was very kind of in your face with a lot of art and a lot of very thoughtful but huge feminist concepts. I felt like when we came to the connection video about fly fishing, it was almost had this calming effect. Eliza, what were your thoughts about this film and Autumn, the main character's foray into fly fishing, which had been notoriously sort of male dominated?
Yeah, so I really liked this one because how she talked about caring for the animals and caring for the natural resources. I can relate to caring for the animals and kind of caring for the environment because that's a big part of life. And I also like how she talked about fly fishing. I feel like that's really important. I've gone fishing with my dad a lot, and you don't see many girls out there on like a lake or a river fishing. So I feel like this is also very inspiring to other people, younger women, that they can go fishing and they can do what they want, even if it is male dominated. So I really like this one too.
One of the things I thought was really interesting is Ellen specifically, I'm looking at Ellen, so I'm going to ask you this question. Autumn specifically talked about the value of mentors and how she had incredible connection to the land and sea through her Indigenous heritage, but how others mentoring her and showing her how and making space for her in those places was really how she was able to move forward and embrace these things that she cared about. How important have you are mentors, but Ellen, have you had anyone in your life that has done that same thing for you in an area that you care about?
Yeah, well, I think all of our first mentors were probably our parents. And I have a special relationship with my mom that I think the most important thing that I really appreciate in a mentor is actually like when they give me that space to fail. Because I think if someone always expects perfection and expects great things, then it's hard to ever have wiggle room where I didn't feel I did as good as I wanted other people to do. And I know that a lot of people obviously struggle with things like that in school, and I know I have. But I've appreciated those people that like don't even address the failure. They just address, okay, like, well, here's my advice on how to move forward. And I think for a long time I've seen mentors as like this big, scary, like, I'm here to tell you right from wrong, or I'm here to condemn you and then support you when you do right. But now I feel like through my role as a mentor personally, but then also just growing up and developing a big, greater relationship with my mom, like I said, or others, I see them more as like someone that I'm comfortable talking to about mistakes that I've made or ways that I need help progressing forward. So that's what I appreciate most about the mentors in my life.
Thank you. Well, looking at film number 7, Taking Care of Business, which focuses on Betty Saar, who is an assemblage artist. I had never heard that term before, but it makes perfect sense. She sees her history as an artist through this lens of activism. And Natalie, I know that you felt a very strong connection to the film. One of the things that I thought was most interesting is that Betty talked about until she received funding to continue making art, she didn't connect with the idea of being an artist. I think everyone on this panel is an artist and has talked about art in their lives. What does it mean to be an artist?
Just to reiterate, was that a question for me?
Yes.
Okay. It's hard to define what it means to be an artist. I think if you make art, you're an artist. That's kind of the short answer. But that experience that she's talking about, not feeling legitimate until she receives that funding, I think that's I think that's why, first of all, a lot of adults, even if they make art, don't consider themselves artists if they're not making income from it. I think it kind of speaks to how we attach money as being important, or money as having the most meaning. So this art is important because it costs the most, right? Even if it's not the art that you connect with the most. That's how collectors and studio culture works. When you're critiquing art, it's not necessarily the art that costs the most money that you connect the most with, but the art that's getting bought and the art that's important to the market is whatever's collectible. And we see kind of almost like a cult of personality around certain artists, right? I think immediately of like Jeff Koons. And is his art necessarily the best art out there, or has he played the capitalist game the best? And so women that are telling their story through this art, I think about women in my life that make things that they wouldn't consider art, like quilts. I had a great grandma that made quilts that were just awesome. She made all my Halloween costumes when I was little, and I would consider her an artist, but she's never received compensation for that or recognition in that way. And I had a long conversation with someone the other day about the connection between low income people and art. And so art like Betty Saar's, which is assemblage, finding these bits and pieces and putting them together that might not be very expensive to create, yields less value on the market sometimes than art that is more expensive to create. And how low income people make things all the time out of necessity that I think are artistically valuable, but not because they cost the most. Yeah, I don't know where to take it from there, but I think that Betty Saar's story has a lot to do with the connection between being valued as an artist because your art is valuable, and not because people connect to it and connect to your story. And I think that discourages a lot of adults from making art.
And really quick,
Enjoy.
before you ask another question, Brooke, the one thing that I stuck out the most throughout that whole time was that, like, the art that she was making by turning those derogatory images of African Americans was like what was the most popular and what gained her the recognition by all those people in the 60s that weren't considering her an artist. And I thought it was funny because technically, like, the population, the white American population, created the art that then they found to, like, love when she turned it around. And I thought that was funny how they technically created the art in their racist ways.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, Betty Saar's story of really melding art with social activism was really powerful because, once again, it's a story of a woman, finding a way. And I think about that in all of these stories. This is women finding ways to meet their goals, to better their lives, all of these things. And it's exactly what we're doing. Sometimes it feels like we're making it up as we go along, because we send you out into these schools, hopefully armed with a lot of training and a lot of good ideas, but we have no idea what's going to come out of the mouths of these students you're working with. And you go out there very bravely and find a way. And that's really amazing. I mean, I could stay on this for another hour with you all talking about this for sure, but I know we are out of time. I'm so excited that we were able to amplify your voices today through this, and I hope that this is just the beginning of how you take the films of LunaFest and grow your knowledge, understanding. And so what we're going to be doing at Chrysalis is we'll be continuing the conversation as well. We'll be looking at ways that we can take action to better the lives of women and girls, especially with this knowledge in mind. And we'll continue to do what we do in Girl Power, which is building the next generation of leaders, helping girls, young girls recognize their own empowerment, and continuing to get better each and every year. I thank you so much for letting me be a part of this conversation with you. I'm going to ask Terry to come back in for some final comments.
I don't know about everyone else, but I am just breathless with the depth of this conversation. And I can't thank each of you enough, Natalie, Ellen, Cora, Eliza, Mia, and Brooke, for moderating the conversation. You brought such depth to the thinking about these films and the stories they were telling. But for me, it gives me so much hope for the future, because you are the leaders of our future. And I can't think of any better role models to put in front of younger girls in Chrysalis after school than each of you. Thank you for all that you do for us. This is just one opportunity for those that are watching to meet the Girl Power peer mentors. I hope that those of you that have heard of Girl Power Hour know that we are going to repeat this type of conversation. One begins a week from tonight, and then we have 2 subsequent events with these young women who are our future leaders, but bring such quality and introspection to examining these issues. Thank you so much. This was so meaningful to me. To those of you that support Chrysalis, this is an example of what the young women of the future are going to be. We've been doing this for 30 years, and I can tell you, I continue to be encouraged and motivated by the young women that I meet every day. So thank you for being with us. Thank you for joining the Chrysalis LunaFest partnership. I hope you come to Girl Power Hour. We will be drawing names from those that attended tonight for some prize drawings, some door prize drawings. So we will get a hold of you if you're a winner. But for those of you that are here with me, and those of you that are watching, I know that they each send a big thank you to every single one of you for taking the time to visit with us tonight and for working with the girls at Chrysalis After School. Thank you, Brooke, for leading the conversation. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.